Hey everybody, welcome back. We are here with the great Peter Schweizer, Red-Handed. Everyone check out the book right now. Peter, we could get into this, as we go case by case, because I do want to get into the specifics of the book. It's just such an important contribution what you've done here, and courageous, by the way, because people are so afraid to touch this topic. How much of this kind of selling out of the America to China, how much of this is just kind of seeking profits? What's the psychology behind here? How do these elites that you have on the front cover here, John Boehner, Elon Musk, Nancy Pelosi, LeBron James, I think that's Henry Kissinger, if I'm not mistaken, and then Bill Gates, and then Joe Biden, how do they justify this?
It's a great question, Charlie. I think for some people, the motivation is profit and money, particularly those that don't have a lot of it. If you're in public life and you're a guy like Joe Biden, and you want to accumulate assets, or your family wants to accumulate assets, it's going to be very tempting, and you're going to be willing to play ball if you don't have moral problems with doing this. With other people like Bill Gates, who's worth $100 billion plus, it's harder to understand. And I think in a lot of cases, the motivation isn't simply just about money. I think if you look at Bill Gates, I think if you look at Elon Musk, I think if you look at the guys at Google, there's you might say, authoritarian impulse or an authoritarian lust that they have. That's a pretty strong statement to make, but they make these statements about China where they talk about the fact that decision-making in China is so much more efficient. Some of them even say that the Chinese dictatorship is more responsive to the needs of the people than America's democratic republic. It's a bizarre sort of position to have, but I think they actually believe it. And I quote in the book from a computer scientist from MIT in the 1970s, a guy named Weizenbaum, who makes a really interesting observation, Charlie. He said those that work in technology, that are computer programmers, in a sense, they can develop a godlike complex. Because unlike any military commander, political leader, when they are doing their work as a programmer, they are God. They get to configure the program, the universe, the platform, the way that they want to do it. That's what Mark Zuckerberg got to do with Facebook. He got to, in a sense, reformulate the way in which people interact. And his concern was that this leads people in the tech space to think that they should start reorganizing the rest of the world. So I think it's money, certainly in the case of a lot of politicians. But I think when it comes to these very wealthy elites on Wall Street and Silicon Valley, there is this respect and admiration that they have for dictatorship that's very troubling. And I think is part of the reason they say such wonderful things about Beijing. It's not just getting access to the market. They actually really believe some of this stuff.
That's such an important point. I mean, you remember Mike Bloomberg said that when he was running for office. He's like, well, come on, you're trying to tell me that Xi Jinping isn't responsive to the needs of his people? And you're right. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, it's not just a matter of being God and configuring a new universe. It's even worse than that. It's like, I can see what other people think as well. Like, I can go see their private messages. I can see their thoughts and their I can manipulate them. I can actually incentivize them to buy certain products and feel certain ways and to get really depressed or really excited. And I can control dopamine flows in teenage girls, like really creepy. You're right. It's beyond any sort of control that Alexander the Great ever would have possibly ever had. 2,500 years ago. Okay, so we have 2 minutes left in this segment, and then we have a break and then a really long segment that I want to dive into this with you. But before we get into the specifics, because the next segment I would just want to talk all about Biden, and I have so many questions about this. When you did this research, were you shocked at the extent of the connection between the American ruling class in every single industry to the Chinese Communist Party?
Yes, I was. I expected there to be more big names in big tech and on Wall Street who would refuse to play the game with Beijing. That's the reality. I mean, if you look at the titans of the tech world, you're talking about Bill Gates, you're talking about the founders of Google, you're talking about Mark Zuckerberg, a few others that I mentioned in the book. Every single one of them has deep, troubling and serious ties with Beijing. Same thing on Wall Street, BlackRock, Blackstone, Ray Dalio's Bridgewater Associates, the biggest hedge fund in the world, all of them falling over themselves, saying wonderful things about President Xi, turning their gaze elsewhere when it comes to serious human rights violations or the national security threat that China poses. Every single one of them is doing this. So it is all pervasive. There are a few courageous voices resisting this in the tech world. I talk about Peter Thiel, who has sounded the alarm bells on this very effectively. But yes, I'm alarmed by the extent of it. I'm also alarmed by the fact, Charlie, that nobody asks them these questions. When they go on CNBC, when they go on ABC News, they never get asked questions about the things they say about China.
Never. So we have to take a break. It's Red-Handed, Peter Schweizer. Long segment coming up next, and we are now going to get into Biden and the specifics. It'll blow your mind, everybody. Charlie Kirk, be right back.